Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Juice Guy Show. This week, we're going to be going over the historical evidence for the person of Jesus Christ. This will be two parts. This week will be the first part. And hey, Jack, thank you for tuning in. Hopefully it will be. I believe so. We're going to be going over some of the non-biblical written accounts of the person of Christ, as well as some bits of archaeological evidence that they have for the crucifixion and a few other pieces. And then we will, next week, we'll go into the second part, which will be the New Testament records, Christian sources that record as well as the church fathers that record the person of Christ. And then we'll actually go into the reliability of the New Testament records. And that should be interesting, as well as cross-examination of the New Testament records, the Gospels, and the epistles. So then we'll go into the evidence for the birth as well as death and resurrection of Christ. So that should be interesting. I'll also go over the Star of Bethlehem at that point and what I believe it may have been. I actually wrote a blog post back around Christmas time going into a lot of the Greek terminology, the words being used in reference to the Star of Bethlehem. You can find that on our website, thoughtprovokinghour.com website. It's on there, and you can kind of read and get a little insight prior to the talk about that. Hey, Kim, thank you for tuning in. Appreciate it. So much of the work that I'm actually doing, which let me put the actual, I was going to do this a while ago, and I didn't do it in time. I actually have to do some of the actual status, the video that has the information in the status. I have to, it's not even popping up. I changed it slightly prior to doing the show, but I wasn't able to do that, add some of the info into the actual status because I was running a bit behind and it won't allow me to do that. So I'm going to try to do that right now. If I can, that is, because I want to have you guys, there's a link in there for the, let me do this, I do apologize. I was running slightly behind. We had a little change of event. Our kiddos went to oh goodness, Vacation Bible School today. And so it was a little scattered there to get things together, but So this is the book that I'm actually basing some of the stuff off. It's called Evidence That Demands a Verdict. I'm trying to actually get this correct here. Written by Josh and Sean McDowell. They were lawyers actually on a journey to disprove Christianity, and at the end of it, they ended up coming to the conclusion that Christianity was true, and they converted to Christianity, and they compiled this information that they gathered over the years of investigation, and it's really well, thoroughly put together book with plenty of evidence for both the Old and New Testament. So it's very good books. If you want to, the link is in the description of the video. You can order it through Amazon, check it out. Bobby Kyle, thank you for coming on. I appreciate it. I appreciate all you guys. Please like the video and share, get the word out there. The whole goal for this show for me is to really delve into evidence and for scriptures. I believe it is, especially in our day and age, should be one of the primary focuses of the church. A lot of the reasons why we're losing so much of the younger generation is they're going to atheistic philosophies is because of the lack of, or the belief of the lack of evidence that supports a Christian worldview. So they abandon the faith as they're taught by liberal professors that Christianity is false and there's no evidence for God, and so on and so on. So I believe that every church nowadays should have a focus, at least some type of class or course focused on Christian apologetics to help, especially the younger generation, understand that this is true, and the evidence, there's plenty of evidence to support it both through the Old and New Testament. So that's my goal with this show, as well as later on delving into some deeper theological issues, especially those ones that we struggle with within the Christian church, some different ideas. And so have some fun with this show. And so we're making our way through here. I pieced this thing together. I got some scattered notes going on here, but it should be pretty interesting. Again, we're going through the written records and of non-biblical, non-Christian sources here for the actual historical person of Christ. Again, please like and share. And if you want to help support after the show, you can click the link on there for PayPal or Patreon. Any amount helps to support as I do my work. I'm planning on trying to I have a couple of books in mind that I've been having in mind. I just haven't had the time to write them with work, family life, and also trying to do the show and studies and schooling. So yeah, should be interesting. We'll begin by prayer, and then we'll go into the study. Dear Lord God, Jesus Christ, thank you for us gathering here today online. Help bless this show, this ministry, and help it grow and help it touch people's lives. Help us learn and to learn the truth of your word and the truth of your existence, Lord, and that you're there for us and to help us and lift us up out of the pit of sorrow and sin, and help us walk in the light and love that you have that is contained within you, Lord. Help us be a light to the lost world around us, and cleanse us from our sins this evening, and help us have an open mind, and help us to be able to absorb the knowledge that you have provided with us through the stress and trials of others that have took the time to research and to sacrifice their time and their work to gather the information to help combat the corruption that's going on today. Please be with us, Lord. Fill us, Holy Spirit, this evening. Love more than anything. Great name, pray, Lord Jesus Christ. Father in heaven. Amen. All right. Dawn, thank you for tuning in. Appreciate it. Appreciate all you guys taking your time out of your day to listen to me chatter over here. And I will do my best, that's for sure. Okay. So we're going to look at non-biblical sources. The first part, it's going to be broken down into three sections here. The first part are the sources that have no real significant influence on Christianity or on the person of Christ. It's not legitimately considered. Hey, Bubba, I hope all is well. I hope you and your wife are doing well and her treatment is going well. So thank you for tuning in. And then we're going to go into a little bit more significant sources, and then we'll finally go into actual significant sources of that of Tacitus and Josephus. And so bear with me. I got a lot of notes. I'm trying to get it all centered. So the very first source we're going to look at is actually a Jewish source dating back to around the 5th century AD. And that is what's called, now I'm going to try to pronounce some of this stuff as best as I can, but it's called the Toledo, I think is how you pronounce it, Yeshu. Like I said, it was written in the 5th century AD. It has, it speaks of Christ. It speaks of Christ performing miracles, magic, and it also speaks of Christ being a false prophet. And but it has a lot of anti-Christian polemic within it, and so it's not really a very good legitimate source because it's written nearly about 400 or so years after the time of Christ's death and resurrection. And the rhetoric that's embedded within it is strictly anti-Christian. They're attacking the Christian faith, so it's it's pumped up. It's not actually, it's exaggerated schemes to try to divert people from the Christian faith. People that are heavily involved at that time period into the into the faith of Judaism, and wanted to hold on to the rituals and discount the life and ministry and death and resurrection of Christ. So it's not a very good legitimate source, but it does mention Christ. As I said, though, it stems from the 5th century AD, so it's quite a ways after the time of Christ. And this is actually a piece of parchment from the scrolls of that particular book. Now, the next one, of course, some of you more than likely know, and that is the Koran. The Koran is another source that actually mentions Christ within it. It actually mentions Christ as a messenger of God. Whenever Muhammad was taken up into heaven, he met Christ there, and Christ told him that the people were worshiping him and that they didn't need to do that, and that he was just a messenger of God, and so on and so on. In the Quran, it also, as I said, it mentions that Jesus was not God. And there's actually a quote stating in the Quran that says, "Those who say God the Messiah, the son of Mary, are defying the truth." So they don't necessarily reject that Christ was a messenger, but they reject the whole idea that he was the Messiah and that he was God. And then there's also the rejection of the Trinity within the Quran. The excerpt says, "So believe in God and his messengers and do not speak of a Trinity. Stop this. That is better for you." And they also deny the crucifixion of Christ as well. Although there's plenty of evidence to support it, which we'll get into later on in the show. The issue with the Quran is that it was written around 631 AD, so approximately 600 years after the time of Christ. So it's not a very good legitimate source, although it does mention Christ several times within it, kind of showing that he was a historical person, and also a messenger of God, but he wasn't the Son of God. But it was written so much far after that can't really legitimately be taken as a credible source, not including the fact that it's pretty much the only source that states that about Christ from that time period. So those are the two sources that are the least credible, least significant sources that we have. Now we're going to go into more significant sources that mention, and there's actually several of them, and then we'll look at the most significant, which are there's two sources of those. So, let me try to find the correct pictures. Kind of have these mixed up just a little bit, but I will do my best here. I think I need to label these things, apparently. We'll just take a smack at it. I know a couple of them, but this particular one Not so much. So I think this is correct. I should have done a little, oh no, that's Taticus. Okay, there we go. I can it actually has his name on the stone. Okay, I believe this is the guy. Well, at least go with it anyhow at this particular moment in time. So, Suetanus, he was a Roman historian from around the year 120 AD. So, within the 2nd century AD, not too far from the time of Christ. He was a court official under the Emperor Hadrian, and he wrote the book called Lives of the Caesars. It documents the first 12 Roman emperors. In the portion where it's the deified Claudius, 25:4, he says, since the Jews constantly made disturbances at the instigation of Christus, he expelled them from Rome. The word there is spelled C. I was hoping maybe I actually had the portion. I don't think I do the actual photo of this, unfortunately. As I said, I'm a little unorganized today. We've been very busy here lately, so do not judge me too harsh. Okay, I don't have it, but anyway, it's spelled Chrestus, and so a lot of historians have debated whether or not this is a reference to the person of Christ or a person named Christus. Now, Christus was a popular name in that time for Gentile people. But it seems as though this actual event that he is referring to is actually documented in Acts chapter 18, verse 2. Luke had documented it, and it occurred around 49 AD. And so historians some of them do believe that it's actually translated because the Latin word for Christus is Christ. And so they believe that there is a chance that could be more of a reference to Christ rather than an actual person. But it does kind of reference that of the Christians either way. Whether or not Christus was an actual leader of the Christians in that particular area is unknown. But they believe that it could be translated as Christ. He also referenced Nero's fire in 64 AD, where the punishment inflicted on Christians. Nero blamed the fires on the Christians and tormented them in very disturbing ways, to say the least. You can actually do some research on that, and it's not pretty by no stretch of the imagination. And so now we go to Pliny the Younger. And unfortunately, like I said, I actually think that was Pliny the Younger. So I'm getting all confused here. Trying to do my best with the statues, and I did not label them, but we'll just roll with it, I guess. I believe, close enough. Pliny the Younger. So he's the governor of Bithynia from AD. He wrote 9 books of letters. The 10th one was actually published after his death. And he wrote those around AD 111 to AD 113. So still not far from the time of Christ's life and death and resurrection. And so in letter 96, which was he talks about the Emperor Trajan, and this guy would punish Christians who did not renounce their faith. So Roman citizens that did not renounce their faith of following Christ, they were sent to Rome for trial. Non-Roman Christians were just executed on the spot. So very harsh deal. And there's actually an excerpt talking about him. Let me find this right quick. I think it's the very first one, if I'm not mistaken. It was not. Whenever I email these things to myself, for whatever reason, they come out a little different and now I'm going to be scattering around here trying to find this exact. I think this is it right here. It says in the book, he writes, he writes that those who deny Christ all venerated your image and the images of the gods as the others did and reviled Christ. They also maintained that the sum total of their guilt or error was no more than the following. They had met regularly before dawn on a determined day and sung antiphonally a hymn to Christ as if to a god. They also took an oath not for any crime, but to keep from theft, robbery, and adultery, not to break any promise, and not to withhold a deposit when reclaimed. So, speaking of the Christians at that particular point in time, and as I said, that was within 100 years from the time of Christ. He's already talking, and he actually mentions Christ as though an actual historical person, and that's the focus of today, is the historicity of Christ himself. And it wasn't just some made-up character that the Christians invented, but rather an actual person that lived here on earth. And so this helps strengthen our faith in knowing that Christ did actually live and rise again, and died and rose again. All right, so now we go into Lusinian Samosata, I believe they said that. Again, we're just going to roll with the punches on some of the images here. I have a couple that I do know for sure, but we're going to say this is the guy. He was a Greek satirist of the latter half of the 2nd century, so sometime right around the time of Pliny the Younger, as well as Suetanus. And just a little later in that century. He spoke scornfully of Christ and the Christians. He also mentions the death of a Christian that renounced his faith, Perigius. I think that's how you pronounce that. And he wrote in there around 165 AD that one whom they still worship today, the man in Palestine who was crucified because he brought this new form of initiation into the world. Let me see. Okay, no, that's later on. So that's another source that mentions Christ just within the 2nd century, not too far after the life and death of Christ itself. And as I said, these are all non-biblical sources that are being derived, mentioning Christ right around the time of Christ. Now, this guy, Thalius, was actually living right during the time of Christ himself. Right around 55 AD, he was an historian, and he had 3-volume account of Eastern and Mediterranean world from the fall of Troy to 50 AD. Now, unfortunately, most of the work has been lost, but quotations remain in the history of the world, written by Julius Africanus around AD 220. Some of that has also been lost, unfortunately, but a citation was included in Chronicle, written around 800 AD by Byzantine historian Georgius Sinilus. I'm assuming that's how you pronounce it. And hey, Alan, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for coming on. Really appreciate it. And the third book, Thalius he talks about the darkness that actually occurred during the time of Christ's death. He says he recalled it being caused by an eclipse of the sun. So it's very interesting. He actually talks about that event occurring, that the sun was actually darkened during that same time, around the approximate time of the death of Christ, and it being from the eclipse of the sun. So he also mentions Christ and the event that transpired. That brings us to Celsus. We'll pretend it's him. Anyway, Celsus lived around AD 175 AD. He wrote the book True Doctrine, and it was an attack on Christianity, which unfortunately most of it was lost. But one of the church fathers, Origens, had wrote a book called Against Celsus around 250 AD. So he had access to his book. Peter, thank you for coming on. Appreciate it. He had access to that book, and he wrote a rebuttal to his particular book in AD 250 AD. What he claims in that book, one of the things he talks about is a virgin birth. Celsus claimed that Mary actually didn't have a virgin birth, that rather she committed adultery out of wedlock with a Roman soldier. And the miracles that he performed were actually, that Christ performed, were actually magic and sorcery that he learned in Egypt while living in Egypt. And he also taught his followers to beg and rob. And of course, these seem to be exaggerated false claims, which Origen goes on to rebuttal. But he mentions Christ as a historical person around 140 or so years after the time of the death of Christ. I'm not sure if I actually have that guy, because these aren't. Let's go see if it's some. Okay, I don't have a picture of this guy, but we'll go ahead and run with it. Name is Marabar Seraphon. He lived around 70 AD. He was a Stoic philosopher, Syrian. Oh, and he wrote a letter in prison to his son, encouraging him to pursue wisdom, and mentions, makes a reference to that of Christ. At least, let's see. Yeah, so it's actually an excerpt of what he wrote. It says, "What good did it do to the Athenians to kill Socrates, for which deed they were punished with famine and pestilence? What did it avail the Samians to burn Pythagoras, since their country was entirely buried under sand in one moment? Or what did it avail the Jews to kill their wise king, since their kingdom was taken away from them from that time on?" So this appears to imply a reference to Christ himself. So God justly avenged these three wise men. The Athenians died of famine. The Samians were flooded by the sea. The Jews were slaughtered and driven from their kingdom, everywhere living in the dispersion. Socrates is not dead, thanks to, there it is. Thanks to Plato, nor Pythagoras because of Hera's statue, nor the wise king because of the new law which he has given. So this is obviously a implication of that of Christ and the new law, the new commandments and stuff that he had given, the revolutionary ministry that he had done. And so those are the lesser significant accounts. Now we're going to actually go into the two significant sources that we have. And so this should be rather interesting. Let me try to make sure I have my notes here correct as far as the excerpts. I like to make sure we have plenty of that going on. Okay. Yeah, I think that is from that. All right. So the first person we're going to talk about here, we're going to talk about two different historians, that of Thacker and the Jewish historian, which Thacker was a Roman historian, and we're going to talk about Josephus, who was a Jewish historian. And the first we'll talk about is Thacker. This man right here. Just want to actually know for sure. So his name was actually Cornelius Tacticus, and I may be saying that incorrectly necessarily. There's a good chance that he was a Roman historian that lived around AD 56 to 120. So he was right at the time, just shortly. He was born shortly after the time of Christ, of the death and resurrection of Christ. So he wrote Annals, I think that's how you pronounce it. Augustus through Nero. He references Nero's fire, AD 64, blaming the Christians. He has no mention or reference of the resurrection. Let's see here. I got to make sure exactly which ones I'm doing here. I want to make sure I have the right quotations going on. Looking on my phone, that way I kind of have an idea. Okay, let's see. Okay, that's all Josephus. All right, so this right here is an actual, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, it says, therefore, to squelch the rumor, Nero created scapegoats and subjected to the most refined tortures those whom the common people called Christians, hated for their abominable crimes. Their name comes from Christ, who during the reign of Tiberius had been executed by the procurator Pontius Pilate. Suppressed for the moment, the deadly superstition broke out again, not only in Judea, the land which originated this evil, also in the city of Rome, where all sorts of horrendous and shameful practices from every part of the world converge and are fervently cultivated. So this is what he was writing about the Nero's fire at AD 64, and he referenced Christ as an actual historical person that was executed by Pontius Pilate. Procurator is perfect Pilate, which is actually from the Pilate stone. I was actually going to save it for the historical evidence, but might as well delve into a really small photo. This is what they discovered years ago, and it reads on there. We want to notice here. It actually reads on there, to the divine Augustus Tiberium, and this was actually etched in around AD 26 to 37. It says Pontius Pilate, from what they have on the inscription there. It says Pontius Pilate, perfect of Judea, had dedicated this, and it's supposed to be, this stone. And they're not sure exactly what else it says because all the words are scratched off, unfortunately. But many historians debated whether or not Pontius Pilate was an actual real person because there wasn't much historical records to reference his name. Of course, now we have Tacitus referencing him, and we actually have the stone that references Pontius Pilate right around the time, dating to the time of Christ. And so, very interesting. Let me get my stuff situated here. And so, let's see. Yeah, no mention of the resurrection. And, some people have sit there and tried making the claim that Christians manipulated his text to add this in to make it more believable, that Christianity was believable and that Christ was a real person. But it seems stylistically seamless. Most historians agree that this is actual words, statement from Tacitus, and it actually lines up with the remainder of his other texts as well. So there's no alterations within there. And he had access to what was called the Acta Senatus, I believe. It was a Roman Senate's archives. So he was able to go back through, look at who was ruling at a particular time, and put all these notes together and write it out. So yeah. All right, where are we at? We're 33 minutes. Okay. Now we're going to look at Josephus. Now Josephus is a little bit more information on him. Some actually couple interesting passages that he wrote about in his books. So this is an artistic depiction of Josephus, who was a Jewish politician, soldier, and historian that lived around 37 AD to 100 AD. So he was born just a few short years after the death and resurrection of Christ. And he was his father was actually one of the high priests that worked in the temple. So he was a devout Jewish believer, devout practicer of Judaism. And so, so we're going to go through a couple of things. It's very interesting. Let's see. He would have actually kind of grown up around the same time as the Acts, as the book of Acts, the events that transpired in there. And he actually went to Rome around 66 AD and submitted himself to the Roman government at that time. That was right at the time of the invasion and the start of the Roman Jewish War that lasted from right around 66, 67 AD to 73 AD, and that was around the destruction of the Second Temple and the scattering of the Jewish people. And yeah, absolutely, Joe. Absolutely. Amen to that. And that's what I'm trying to get at with this stuff, is to show that he is a true historical figure. And most historians do not debate that nowadays. They believe now whether or not they believe the claims that are made within the New Testament text, which we'll get more into that in the following weeks whenever we actually look at the reliability of the New Testament documents, and so should be very good. But he was the single most important Jewish historian of the ancient world. He wrote what was called the Antiquities of the Jews, and it helped explain the Jewish people and their beliefs as to the Romans at that time. He wrote it while he was in Rome to help kind of explain what the Jewish people did, their practices, their beliefs, the rituals that they conducted, their lifestyles, and so on and so on. It was pretty much in an effort to reduce anti-Jewish bigotry. And so there's two main passages we're going to look at here. First one is Antiquities 2200. It speaks of the death of Jesus' brother James at the instigation of the high priest Ananias. I believe it's how you say that, Ananias. Maybe incorrect on that. My pronunciation skills are horrible, but do my best. All right. Some people believe that the Christians added this. This was a later addition by Christians by putting Jesus' brother James. But most historians believe that is not an addition. That is actually something that Josephus have put in there to describe whose brother it actually was. He actually references people with the name Jesus multiple different times throughout his text. And not including the fact that in all of the Greek manuscripts of the Antiquity of the Jews, this verbiage actually appears. Jesus, brother, and let me get the actual text up here. I know I have it in here somewhere. Okay, yeah, he writes about it says, a bold man in his temper and very insolent. He was one of the sect of the Sadducees, who are very rigid in judging offenders above all the rest of the Jews. This is Ananias who he's talking about, as we have already observed. When therefore Ananias was of this disposition, he thought he had now a proper opportunity to exercise his authority. Festus was now dead, and Albinus was but a pawn. Unfortunately, I had to segment it up a little bit. The road. So he assembled the Sanhedrin of judges and brought before them the brother of Jesus, who was called Christ, whose name was James, and some others. He delivered them to be stoned. So the term Christ in there is where people, some historians have sit there and yeah, I know for sure, Helen. I believe that was a later addition by Christians, but most historians actually believe that is true, to be able to distinguish who it is. That's why he said who was called Christ, and not if it was an actual Christian addition later on. They would have more than likely put who was the Christ rather than who was called Christ. And so he was making a distinguishment to help connect who the person was that was being executed. He only mentioned Christos, which is the Greek form of Christ, in connection with Jesus throughout the text, even though he writes about other messianic figures. And so that's very interesting as well. He writes about several other messianic figures that were around at that time, claiming to be the Messiah, but he never actually puts the word Christ in mentioning them, only that of Jesus. And he also, as I said before, he mentions several others, up to 21 other figures named Jesus throughout his text. So he wanted to make a distinguishment of which Jesus this actually was. This was Jesus who was called the Christ. And that Greek word there for was called is the Greek word, forgive me here on this one, legomos, which means it's called or said to be. As I said before, Christians would have, if it was a later addition from Christians, they more than likely would have inserted he was called the Christ, rather than, that was said who was the Christ rather than called the Christ. But this is, and this particular passage within the Antiquities of the Jews, most historians do not debate. So this is an actual reference to not only Christ, but his brother James as well, and his execution. So that's an extra, or it's a non-Christian source speaking of the person of Christ. Now, there's another passage that's a little bit more debated. It seems to be added in, distorted a little bit, but we're going to go over that. This is pretty interesting. This is from Antiquities 1863. It's the Testimonium Flavium, which is, there's only like three ways you can really look at this. Either the entire text is authentic, or the entire text is not authentic at all, or it's a mixture. Josephus mentioned Jesus in this text, but it was subsequently doctored by a Christian interpolator. So let me see. Some people said, well, maybe Josephus converted to Christianity, but the early church father Origen claims he was not. So let's look at this passage real quick. This goes a little bit more in detail. So this is the debated passage found within there. It says, at this time there appeared Jesus, the wise man, if indeed one should call him a man. For he was a doer of startling deeds, a teacher of people who received the truth with pleasure. And he gained a following both among many Jews and among many of Greek origin. He was a Messiah. And when Pilate, because of an accusation made by the leading men among us, condemned him to the cross, those who had loved him previously did not cease to do so. For he appeared to them on the third day, living again, just as the divine prophets had spoken of these and countless other wondrous sayings about him. And up until this very day, the tribe of Christians named after him has not died out. So most scholars believe that this is authentically written by Josephus, but was later doctored up by some Christian scribe. And some have even debated the idea that Christian scribes were putting side notes as they were reading these, reading his books. And as the copying went along, some of the later Christian scribes actually integrated those in. And so there were actually side notes put within. And there's three different parts that are really debated as interpolation. And that is, the first deal is, if indeed one should call him a man, a non-Christian would not actually state something like that, especially a devout Jew. And then the other one is, he was the Messiah. And then the third is, for appeared to them on the third day, living again, just as divine prophets had spoken of these and countless other wondrous sayings about him. So we're going to look at a highly respected biblical scholar, Meyer, and what his rendition is of the actual text. I think this is it. Yeah, this is his take on it. He does it to where it fits more of Josephus' writing style. And we'll look at another one as well. It says, at this time there appeared Jesus, a wise man, for he was the doer of startling deeds, a teacher of people who received the truth with pleasure. And he gained a following both among many Jews and among many of Greek origin. And when Pilate, because of an accusation made by the leading man among us, condemned him to the cross, Those who had loved him previously did not cease to do so. And up until this very day, tribe of Christians named after him has not died out. So this is one rendition of what the text may have, the original text may have actually said. But most scholars, as I said before, most historian scholars believe that it's an actual authentic text written by Josephus, but it was later doctored up a bit with some additives within there. But he does mention Christ again as a actual historical person. There was no denial that Jesus actually lived. Whether or not they believe that he was divine or not is a whole other topic that we'll get in later. This is another rendition that was actually done by Lucina, another respected biblical scholar. He says, it says about this time there lived, and he separates them. He puts in talent. Oh no, this is Charlesworth. I don't know what happened to the one from Lucina. I thought I had it on Lycona. I mean, he trimmed it up and doctors up a little bit. But Charlesworth, he's actually a leading scholar from Princeton University. He believed what he actually points out. So the actual text that was written by Josephus is in normal letters, while the others are in altered. You can see if they're in Italian. I can't even say the word. See, my pronunciation skills are horrible, so bear with me. But anyways, he goes and highlights what would have been Josephus and what would have not been Josephus. And so it gets down, but he was talking, he mostly points out the last sentence where it says that, and the tribe of the Christians, so-called after him, has still to this day not disappeared. And so he's speaking of like they have not actually died off. The faith's still going. I'm wondering when they're going to actually die off, is what Josephus, he believed Josephus was implying. And of course, Charlesworth also, like I said, he was a respected scholar from Princeton University. He has actually went on to say that the significance of these two accounts from the Roman historian Thacker and the Jewish historian Josephus, he said these references to Jesus by a Roman historian and a Jewish historian disprove the absurd contention that Jesus never lived. So that should at least get rid of most of that doubt as far as a historical person. As I said before, many atheists and some historians believe that Christ was just a fictional character that the Christians pumped up and promoted, but the evidence is contrary to that, as we see from non-Christian sources. Another one is New Testament scholar Darrell Bach. He notes that there is no evidence that that those who opposed the movement attributed to him denied his existence. So even the people that opposed Christianity and that of Christ, the person of Christ, still did not actually deny his existence, as we see on the multiple accounts that we have looked at thus far. Oh man, wow! I knew it was going to take a little while. I didn't know it was going to take this long, and that's why I'm doing two parts. So we'll actually look at the New Testament references later. What we'll look at to finish up here is some archaeological evidence. So this is some of this was actually discovered in 2007 and came out in a published paper around 2018, I believe, for evidence for crucifixion. This was actually found in northern Italy and dates back to the 1st century, I believe, 1st or 2nd century AD. So, approximate time frame of Christ and the Christian movement. These are the nail going through the heel of the foot, showing the reference, the evidence for Roman crucifixion at that time. This is another one discovered in 1968. It was actually discovered in Jerusalem, where there was actually a mass Jewish cemetery dating back to the 1st century AD. And this is another heel bone with a 7-inch long nail driven through it. More evidence for crucifixions, Roman crucifixion at the time. Now, crucifixions have actually been around for quite some time. The Romans did not actually invent crucifixions. Crucifixion were actually invented during the first millennium BC, and they were used by the Assyrians, the Persians, and the Phoenicians as a style of execution. The Romans had adopted that from them. And then this right here dates to, I can't remember, 2nd or 3rd century AD. This right here is a crucifixion with the head of a donkey. And it says, I'm trying to remember exactly, let's see here, let's say, it says, I had my notes on here, and now I've been lost them. Let's see. Oh, it says, Alexamenos, I think is how you pronounce his name, worships his God. It was basically making fun of a Roman Christian. They etched in here and wrote it over here in, I believe that's Latin. And it's showing Christ crucified with a donkey head, making fun of Christ. And so, Jack, you're right. I'm sure that hurt. The stories of the crucifixions, hard to swallow. It definitely makes you appreciate the sacrifice of Christ that much more. As you hear the gruesome details, it'll definitely make you shrivel a little bit, to say the least. And so, and this is, here's a page from Josephus' work, one of his copied manuscripts from the Antiquities of the Jews. So that concludes our program for today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Those are all the non-Christian sources that mention the historical person of Christ. As I said, we'll go into the New Testament references of Christ next week, and then we'll start going into the reliability of the New Testament. That one will be fun. There's a lot of information to go over. We'll cross-examine the scriptures, and we'll look at the multitude of manuscripts that we have for the New Testament in comparison to other historical works like Homer's Odyssey and so on and so on. And then we'll actually look at the life, death, and resurrection of Christ. As I said, we'll go into the Star of Bethlehem. If you guys want to actually check out some of my ideas on what the Star of Bethlehem is, using the original Greek words, you can actually look on the thoughtprovokinghour.com and check it out there, the Star of Bethlehem. There's some interesting takes on it. So I hope you guys enjoyed. Again, please like and share. And if you guys have any questions, feel free to message me. If you need prayer requests or anything like that, message me. And if you want to help support my work, again, you can support through PayPal. Any amount helps, or through Patreon. That's a monthly subscription deal. As little as $3 a month. And we have the show on Thursday, Thought Provoking Hour, 7:30 p.m. this week, Central Time. And let me say, then you can check out my books. The links, all the links are in the description, as well as the link for the book of the evidence that demands a verdict. So check that out. Thank you again, guys, for all your support. I really appreciate it. Have a good rest of your week, and look forward to seeing you guys on Thursday and next week. God bless.